You listen to me right now. You don't interrupt, you don't deflect, and you don't walk away. Every decision made here stops until...
Get your dirty hands off that bag. People like you only know how to steal, not how to buy. Marcus Webb's words shattered the elegant atmosphere of the Lumiere high-end boutique. Located on an expensive Manhattan street, soft jazz music played in the background. The warm yellow lights reflected off the display cases, showcasing handbags like a museum. Everything here seemed designed to say one thing. This wasn't for everyone. Dorothy Washington. Lear. A black woman with neatly trimmed silver hair and a simple navy blue cardigan stood before a handcrafted leather bag worth $3. Land bad. She didn't touch it immediately. She didn't scrutinize it. She examined each stitch carefully, as if she understood the value of craftsmanship. She said softly, "I want to examine the stitching. I'm considering it." Webb scoffed. "Considering? Do you think you have enough money to consider it?" Dorothy turned around, her eyes calm. She put the bag back in its place, then reached for her wallet, preparing to take out her card. But before she could do anything, Webb stepped forward and grabbed her wrist. "Don't act. I know these tricks." For a moment, the space seemed to freeze. Then a sharp, cold slap rang out. Webb's open hand struck Dorothy's cheek. She staggered back, her back hitting the glass counter. Her cardigan snagged on the sharp edge. Her Hermes bag fell from her hand, crashing onto the marble floor. Some items inside scattered. Dorothy touched her lips. Blood. About 20 customers stood frozen. No one spoke. No one approached. A teenage girl in the corner instinctively raised her phone. The camera started recording. Webb looked around, his voice full of self-satisfaction. "I don't allow theft in my store." Dorothy lifted her head. No panic. No tears. No pleading. Only a terrifying silence. She looked directly at Webb and said, her voice chillingly even, "Are you sure this is the decision you want to make?" Webb smirked. "I'm sure." The girl with the phone had now started a live stream. A small number appeared on the screen, 12 viewers. No one in the store knew that. In just a few minutes, that number would increase to tens of thousands, and that slap would become the most expensive slap in American retail history. The girl who just started the live stream was Zoe Lane, 17 years old. Initially, Zoe had only entered Lumiere to film a lipstick review for her personal page, but after the slap, her hands were trembling, and her only instinct was to keep the camera pointed straight at the truth. The screen showed live 12 viewers. Zoe whispered, her voice trembling, "Oh my God, everyone! The manager just slapped an elderly black woman right in the store." A comment popped up where Zoe glanced at the sign behind her and quickly said, "Premiere, no. Lumiere in Manhattan." In just a few seconds, the number of viewers jumped to 200, then 800, then 2. Ling ling ling. Every time Zoe blinked, the number increased like someone pouring gasoline on a fire. Dorothy didn't look at the camera. She wasn't looking for pity. She bent down, slowly picking up her belongings one by one, as if trying to reclaim her lost dignity. An old leather wallet, a glasses case, a neatly folded stack of papers, a watch knocked aside. Webb stood with his arms crossed above, as if protecting the shop from some kind of threat. He spoke loudly enough for the entire boutique to hear. "See, she's up to something. People like her always do." The phrase, "people like her," fell like a stone. A middle-aged blonde woman, wearing a pearl necklace, wrinkled her nose slightly and said to her friend in a voice barely a whisper, but loud enough for the camera to pick up. I wonder, so, why is she here? They should check her bag. Comments on the live stream started exploding. Oh my God, that lady too. Racism right there. Someone stop them. Call the police. Dorothy still didn't respond. She picked up a ticket that had fallen from the stack of papers. Zoe instinctively zoomed in. It was embossed in gold. The viewer caught a few words. Private, service, and a name Washington. Dorothy. Dorothy carefully folded it and slipped it into her cardigan pocket as if it were nothing. Just then, Karen Phillips, the assistant manager, emerged from behind the counter. Karen wore a form-fitting black suit. Her makeup sharp and cold. She looked Dorothy up and down as if appraising a cheap item. You must leave immediately. Karen said, We don't tolerate theft. Dorothy looked up. Her voice low but clear. I didn't take anything. Karen scoffed. Of course not. And I'm a Victoria's Secret model. Dorothy reached into her purse and pulled out a shiny black card. But Karen snatched it before Dorothy could hand it over. What kind of card is this? Karen twirled the card between her fingers, acting as if she were holding something disgusting. A fake card. Or a stolen card. Dorothy looked at her, eerily calm. Give it back to me. Karen tilted her head, her voice cold. No. Give it back until I've verified it. Who do you think you are? The live stream had now surpassed 8,000 viewers. Zoe could hear her heart pounding in her ears. She didn't know who Dorothy was, but she knew one thing: Karen had just said something that made all the difference. Dorothy took a breath, slowly reaching out, not to snatch the card, but to take out her phone. The screen vibrated with an incoming call. Dorothy looked at the caller ID, then put it on speakerphone, so the whole store could hear. A professional female voice, sharp as a knife, rang out through the speaker. Hello, Mrs. Washington. This is private banking. Are you on your way to the board meeting? And at that very moment, the smile on Webb's face began to freeze. The boutique fell silent the moment the voice from the phone rang out. Hello, Mrs. Washington. This is private banking. Are you on your way to the board meeting? The jazz music continued playing, but no one could hear it anymore. The air seemed to have been sucked out of the room. Dorothy raised the phone to her ear, her voice still even, still calm, as if there were no blood on her lips. I'll be a few minutes late. There's an unexpected incident at the store. The voice on the other end immediately changed. It was no longer customer service. It was the voice of money, of power, of absolute urgency. Do you need us to coordinate? Ma'am, the helicopter is waiting at the landing strip. Several customers gasped. Karen stood frozen, her hand still clutching the black card as if it might disappear. Webb narrowed his eyes, forcing a smile. You're acting, aren't you? Do you think these fake calls scare me? Dorothy didn't look at Webb. She stared straight ahead, speaking into the phone loud enough for everyone to hear. The management here is accusing me of theft and violent behavior. A long silence followed. Then the voice on the other end responded. Slower, heavier. Are you hurt? Mrs. Washington. Dorothy touched her swollen cheek. I'm fine, but I'm evaluating the service standards of this place. That phrase was like a cold blade. The man standing near the door, wearing a steel watch, holding a copy of the Wall Street Journal, looked up sharply. He looked at Dorothy, then at the black card, then at Karen. His expression changed. He silently took out his phone and began recording. Zoe looked at the number of viewers on the live stream: 12. Seabay. She swallowed hard. Everyone, it seems, she's a very, very important person. Webb tried to salvage his last shred of power. He turned to the customers, his voice louder. Don't believe those emotional manipulation tricks. People like her know how to scare people. Dorothy turned to Webb for the first time since the slap. You just said, people like me. Her voice was neither high nor low, but each word carried a heavy weight. Can you be more specific? What kind of person are you talking about? Webb opened his mouth. He couldn't speak. Karen blurted out, her voice sharp with panic. I mean, the kind of person who's a con artist. Those people are trained to pretend to be polite. The moment the words left her lips, the entire boutique froze. The man holding the newspaper stepped forward. I'm Robert Brooks, financial analyst. He looked directly at Karen. You just said those people. I want to clarify who are. Those is. Karen's face turned pale. I didn't mean. You did. Robert interrupted, his voice sharp. Language reflects thought. Zoe gasped. Dad's here. Robert nodded. The meeting ended early, and I think I'm witnessing a disaster. The live stream jumped to 16,000 viewers. Just then, the back door burst open, the sound of high heels clicking quickly and decisively on the marble floor. Rachel Morrison, the store manager, rushed out, her eyes scanning the chaotic scene. Dorothy with a bleeding lip, Karen holding the card, Webb standing frozen. Dozens of phones pointed like weapons. Rachel swallowed. What's going on here? Dorothy looked at Rachel, her voice still eerily calm. Your employee just slapped me, and I think you should know this is being live-streamed to the whole city. Rachel turned to Zoe. On the screen live 900 viewers. The color drained from Rachel's face. She realized something very late. This wasn't just an incident in the store. This was a collapse unfolding before the eyes of tens of thousands of people. Rachel Morrison stood motionless for a few seconds, struggling to breathe as if she'd just stepped into an oxygen-deprived room. Before her was a nightmare. Every retail manager dreaded violence, discrimination, and tens of thousands of people watching live. There's definitely a misunderstanding here, Rachel said, her voice strained but still trying to maintain her authority. Ma'am, we could talk privately. Dorothy shook her head, very slightly. There's nothing private about this. Rachel froze. Webb quickly stepped forward, as if grasping a last lifeline. We caught her trying to grab her bag. When I intervened, she resisted. Dorothy turned, her gaze calmly cruel. I resisted by standing still and getting slapped. A few customers began to murmur. Robert Brooks raised his phone to zoom in on Webb's face. I was standing here from the beginning. No resistance, just a slap. Rachel spun to Webb, lowering her voice to a whisper. Did you check her papers? Webb snarled. I didn't need to. I knew just by looking. The words were instantly picked up by the live stream. Comments exploded. I look and I know. That's racism. He just admitted it. Rachel closed her eyes for a second. It wasn't a mistake anymore. It was a confession. Dorothy bent down to pick up a business card that had slipped under her silk scarf. She brushed it lightly, then held it up to Rachel's eye level. Washingapore Holdings, Real Estate and Investments. Rachel was speechless. The image of the morning email flashed through her mind like a slap in the face. VIP investor visit today. Treat with utmost respect. She had read it. She had skimmed through it. And she couldn't believe a simple old black woman in a cardigan could be a VIP. Dorothy said, her voice even, I'm considering buying or expanding my investment in this location, but it seems I just got an answer. Webb stammered. No, it can't be. She just someone you thought you could offend. Dorothy finished his sentence for him. The live stream surpassed 21,000 viewers. Outside the window, several passers-by stopped. One person recognized the store's name and began filming from the outside. Rachel's hand trembled as her phone vibrated incessantly in her pocket. She looked at the screen. Calling corporate HQ. She answered. The voice on the other end urgent and panicked. Rachel. What the hell is going on in Manhattan? The video is spreading across the internet. The CEO is watching live. Rachel looked at Dorothy. Then at Zoe. Then at Webb. We're handling it. The voice on the other end roared. Have you called the police yet? Before she could answer, another voice came from the front door. Please move aside. NYPD. Two officers entered. The atmosphere froze completely. Dorothy looked at them, then turned to Rachel, speaking softly but clearly. Now, you no longer have the right to handle it internally. En pieces for Dowlanses, D-were capages, and armatidvels. Rachel stood there, her face pale, as she realized an irreversible truth. The fire she had tried to extinguish had become a city-wide blaze. Two NYPD officers entered the boutique with the familiar gait of those all too familiar with chaos. But a quick glance around the room was enough to tell them this wasn't a normal call. The older officer, Sergeant Martinez, quickly surveyed the scene. Dorothy's cheek was noticeably swollen and red. Dried blood stained her lips. Personal belongings were scattered around. And most importantly, dozens of phones were pointed in the same direction. We've received multiple calls reporting an assault, Martinez said, his voice even but firm. Who is involved? Webb instinctively stepped forward, his commanding presence evident. It's just a misunderstanding. Officer, a customer causing trouble. No. Dorothy interrupted, very politely. Officer, I'm Dorothy Washington. That man slapped me about 20 minutes ago. There are witnesses and video. Martinez turned to Zoe. Are you recording? Zoe swallowed hard, raising her phone. Yes, it's live streaming. About 40,000 viewers. Martinez breathed a sigh of relief. A nationally recognized witness incident. Karen couldn't take it anymore and lunged forward. She stole. We have the right to detain her. Martinez spun around to Karen, his eyes sharp as knives. Do you see any assault warrant in the law? Karen was speechless. The younger officer, Officer Rodriguez, bent down to pick up the black card from the floor. He glanced at it, then looked at Dorothy. Can you confirm this card is yours? Dorothy nodded. Yes. Karen blurted out, her voice trembling. It could be a stolen card. Who would... Ma'am. Martinez interrupted. Silence. Martinez turned to Webb. Sir, I need your identification. Webb rummaged through his wallet, his hands shaking so much that he dropped the card on the floor. Rodriguez picked it up and checked it. Everything was legitimate except the behavior. Martinez turned to look at Dorothy. This was a crucial moment. Mrs. Washington, I need to ask a very important question. The entire boutique held its breath. The live stream had over 48,000 viewers. Do you wish to prosecute this man for assault? Webb looked at Dorothy, his eyes revealing panic for the first time. No more authority. No more condescending tone. Only a man who realized he had gone too far. Dorothy didn't answer immediately. She looked around the store, at the pearl-adorned woman who had silently turned away. At Karen, trembling. At Rachel, standing stiff as a statue. At Zoe, a young girl she didn't know, but who had chosen not to turn away. Then Dorothy said, slowly, clearly, I wish to prosecute. No one breathed. Martinez nodded, turning to Webb. Marcus Webb, you're arrested for third-degree assault. The sound of handcuffs clicking a short, cold sound that echoed through the luxury store. Zoe whispered into the live stream, her voice breaking. They handcuffed him. Webb was led aside. As he passed Dorothy, he uttered his last words, almost a scream. You've ruined my career. Dorothy looked at him, her eyes not angry, just stark truth. You ruined it before I said a word. Just then, Dorothy's phone rang. The caller ID displayed Charles Hendris, CEO. Dorothy looked at Martinez, then put the call on speakerphone. Dorothy. A deep, tense male voice said, I'm on my way. Don't leave. Dorothy nodded slightly, then said something that sent chills down everyone's spines. Come in. We need to talk, in public. And out in Manhattan, the sound of helicopters began to echo in the distance. The helicopter's roar grew louder, echoing down the Manhattan street like a drumbeat signaling an irreversible event. Those in the boutique exchanged glances. No one needed to ask who was coming. Webb sat slumped in the corner, his hands cuffed to his stomach. Sweat trickled down his temples despite the air conditioning being on cold. Karen slumped in a chair, her empty hands trembling, her black card already in the police evidence pocket. Rachel stood in the middle of the store, her eyes fixed on the stone floor, as if a mere glance would send the world crashing down. Dorothy, however, was different. She stood tall and silent, as if she had accepted that this moment was inevitable. The staff stairwell door swung open. A tall, silver-haired man entered with a quick, decisive stride. His tailored suit clung to his shoulders, his expensive watch reflecting the light. Following him was a young woman holding a tablet, her face tense. Please move aside. The man said, I am Charles Hendris, CEO of the company that owns the Lumiere chain. The atmosphere in the store froze. Hendris looked around. Webb was handcuffed. Police were present. Dozens of cameras were recording. And Dorothy stood in the center of everyone's gaze. He walked straight toward her. Dorothy, are you hurt? His voice was low, trying to remain calm. Dorothy lightly touched her swollen cheek. I'm fine. But your company isn't. Hendris turned to Martinez. Officer, what happened? Martinez answered concisely. Your manager assaulted Mrs. Washington. There are videos. She has requested prosecution. Hendris closed his eyes for a second. Just a second, but enough to understand the gravity of the situation. He turned to Rachel. Are you in charge here? Rachel nodded, her voice trembling. Yes, sir. So why did this escalate to the point where I had to fly here in a helicopter? Hendris asked, his voice now icy cold. Rachel couldn't answer. Dorothy spoke, not loudly, but clearly, because this isn't an individual out of control. This is culture. Hendris turned to look at her. What do you mean? Dorothy pointed at Webb. This person believes he has the right to slap me. She pointed to Karen. This person believes he can snatch my credit card because I'm the kind of person I am. A.T. She looked at Rachel. And you believe you can settle this internally, meaning cover it up. The live stream now had over 65,000 viewers. The comments scrolled by so fast Zoe couldn't keep up. Hendris took a deep breath. I'm sorry. Dorothy. On behalf of the company. Dorothy raised her hand. Wait. I don't need an apology just for myself. Hendris froze. Dorothy continued, her voice calm but firm. I need you to stand here and look straight at what your system just did, thinking that no one in a position of authority is watching. Hendris turned to look at Zoe's camera. He saw the viewership numbers. He understood there was no turning back. Jennifer, Dorothy's assistant, stepped up and handed Hendris a tablet. On the screen was a plummeting stock chart. Hashtags were trending. News outlets were submitting comment requests. Hendris swallowed hard. What do you want me to do, right now? Dorothy looked at him. Her gaze, the calm of someone who had thought long before speaking. I want to change the structure, not appease public opinion. Hendris whispered. What if I don't? Dorothy smiled very slightly, not a cheerful smile, but the smile of someone who wasn't bluffing. Then I'll withdraw my capital. I'll call the debt due. And in 72 hours, this system will collapse. A murmur spread through the store. Dorothy looked directly at Hendris, speaking slowly. You have 60 seconds to decide whether this is a scandal or the moment your company is reborn. The helicopter outside had stopped. Now, only one decision hung in the air. No one spoke for the next few seconds. Not because they didn't know what to say, but because everyone understood any answer at this moment would change the fate of hundreds of people. Charles Hendris looked at Dorothy for a long time. Not the look of a CEO looking at an investor, but the look of someone who had just realized true power was standing before them. Silently. You're putting me before a difficult choice, Hendris said, his voice low. Dorothy nodded. I know, but justice is never easy. She turned to look at Webb, the man who had slapped her, now sitting with his head bowed and his hands cuffed. If I remain silent today, tomorrow he'll slap someone else, and that person might not have anyone to answer the phone for them. Karen burst into tears. I didn't know who you were. Dorothy turned to her, her gaze cold but not malicious. And that's the problem. She only acts nice when she knows who she's dealing with. The live stream had now surpassed 72,000 viewers. The comments began to shift in tone. It was no longer just outrage. It was realization. This isn't revenge. This is accountability. She's not angry. She's precise. That's real power. Hendris took a deep breath. Okay. Make it clear what you want. Dorothy nodded. Jennifer immediately stepped forward, opening the file. First, Dorothy said, terminate Marcus Webb and Karen Phillips's contracts immediately. No allowances. No letters of recommendation. The file must state violent and discriminatory behavior. Karen slumped into her chair. Webb closed his eyes. Secondly, Dorothy continued. Rachel Morrison was dismissed for allowing this culture to exist. Leaders are accountable not only for what they do, but for what they allow. Rachel choked back tears. Thirdly, the company must issue a public apology. Acknowledge its wrongdoing. Not use the word misunderstanding. And not evade legal responsibility. Hendris frowned. That will trigger a series of lawsuits. Dorothy immediately retorted, no. Today's behavior has already triggered them. You're just deciding transparency or cowardice. Hendris didn't argue. Fourthly, mandatory anti-bias training for all employees. Failure to complete termination of contract. Fifthly, a system for monitoring customer interactions. Don't let personal feelings dictate who is respected. An employee whispered, that costs millions of dollars. Dorothy turned, her voice even. It costs less than a collapse. The live stream fell silent. Friday, a commitment to diverse management hiring, not for image building. To change perspectives. Dorothy paused. She looked directly at Hendris. And finally, an independent fund to support civil rights organizations in the retail environment. Not for redemption. To prevent recurrence. Hendris looked at the tablet. The cost figure appeared. Tens of millions of dollars. He looked up. If I agree, the company will survive. But we won't be the same. Dorothy nodded. Exactly. Hendris looked around the store, employees trembling. Customers turning. 2 police officers standing at attention. Then he said, loud enough for the camera to capture, "We accept all the demands." The live stream erupted, but Dorothy didn't smile. She only said one sentence, very softly, but it sent chills down everyone's spine. This isn't the end. This is when you start living with the consequences. And in the corner, Marcus Webb finally understood he didn't lose his career because of the slap. He lost it because the system no longer protected him. The atmosphere in the boutique changed drastically after Hendris's words. There was no more murmuring, no more sneering. All that remained was the heavy silence of the aftermath. Sergeant Martinez turned to Webb. "Stand up." Webb obeyed. His legs heavy as lead. The handcuffs tightened as he was led out before everyone, before the cameras. Before the eyes that had been silent when Dorothy was slapped. Webb struggled with one last word. "You don't understand. I was just doing my job. I was protecting the shop." Dorothy turned. Her voice not loud but sharp enough to cut him off. "No, you were protecting your prejudices, and you used your power to do so." Martinez read Miranda's authority. Each word fell like a final punctuation mark to his role as manager. As the handcuffs closed again in preparation for his escort, Webb looked at Dorothy. His eyes read, "You destroyed my life." Dorothy looked straight ahead, calmly. "You destroyed it the moment you thought no one would believe me." Webb was led out the front door. Outside, flashlights flashed incessantly. Reporters called his name. "Marcus, do you have any comment on the racism allegations?" Webb bowed his head. No answer would suffice to salvage the situation. Karen Phillips stood motionless. Her hands clasped together as if trying to hold on to what she had lost. Rodriguez stepped forward. "Ma'am, you need to cooperate with some procedures. Holding Mrs. Washington's card could constitute property seizure." Karen burst into tears. "I was just following procedure." Dorothy turned to her, her voice cold. "Procedure never requires you to steal a client's card and humiliate them." Rachel Morrison finally spoke, her voice breaking. "If you had said so earlier, if I had known who you were." Dorothy cut her off, not letting her finish. Then she would have treated them differently. And that's what makes her unfit to lead. Rachel slumped, understanding that her career was over not because of a mistake, but because of a choice. Jennifer handed Hendris the tablet. Messages from headquarters poured in suspension. Press release. Emergency meeting. Hendris nodded, giving a brief order. "Do it now." Zoe looked at the viewership 78. Ling, ling, ling. She whispered into the live stream, "Everyone, they're really being arrested. No one is getting protection anymore." Dorothy took a step toward the camera. She wasn't seeking applause. She just spoke. Slowly and clearly. Justice isn't about seeing someone handcuffed. Justice is when no one dares to raise a hand on the weak anymore. Outside, the sirens of police cars faded into the distance. Webb had left no more title, no more shield. Only one man remained to face his own actions. Inside the boutique, the remaining people stood amidst the invisible ruins of the old power structure, and they understood from this moment on. All eyes were on them. Dorothy turned to Hendris, her voice returning to normal. as if concluding a meeting. The personal part is done. Now, let's talk about the systemic part. And that's when the story entered a new chapter, no longer about a slap in the face, but about how a system is forced to change when the light is no longer out. The boutique doors closed after Webb was escorted away. The noise outside flashes. Reporters. Car horns still echoed through the thick glass. But inside, the atmosphere was like a boardroom after a life-or-death decision had been made. Dorothy turned to Charles Hendris, no longer the voice of a victim, no longer the voice of a victor, only the voice of someone in charge. "Now," she said, "we're talking about what created Webb." Hendris nodded slowly. He understood. Firing someone was easy. Changing the system that nurtured them was the hard part. Jennifer opened her tablet, connecting it to the large screen in the store. Charts appeared: customer complaints, employee retention rates, internal reports that had previously been relegated to the non-priority category. In the last 3 years, Dorothy said, pointing to the data, there have been 17 complaints of discriminatory behavior at your stores. None of them have been taken to the board. Rachel lowered her head. Karen didn't dare look up. Dorothy continued, each time, the system does the same thing, downplays the severity, handles it internally, and hopes no one turns on the lights. Zoe panned the camera across the pale faces. The live stream remained steady at 82,000 viewers, no more spikes. But no one was leaving. They were waiting for something to actually change. Hendris sighed. "We have procedures. We have training." Dorothy shook her head. "You have documentation, not a commitment." She turned to the rest of the store staff. "Are you trained to handle suspected shoplifting without offending people?" A young employee shook his head, his voice trembling. "We were taught to trust our managerial intuition." Dorothy nodded. "Intuition isn't legally responsible. People are." She turned to Hendris. "This is why I'm asking for an interactive monitoring system. Not to punish, but to prevent." Hendris asked, his voice low, "How long do we have to implement it?" 90 days. Dorothy replied. "And during that time, every store must have a direct complaint channel, not through local management." Jennifer snapped, "We've contacted our technology partner. We can start right away." Outside, a reporter tapped the glass, gesturing for comment. Hendris looked at Dorothy. Dorothy said, "You'll speak, but you'll tell the truth." Hendris stepped in front of the camera, sweat beading on his forehead. "Today, we failed," he said, "and we're not going to hide it." Inside, Dorothy turned to Zoe, her voice softening for the first time. "Keep the camera on a little longer. This part is important." Zoe nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen. Dorothy looked directly into the lens, speaking to the tens of thousands watching. Change doesn't come from one person being caught. Change comes when a system is forced to look in the mirror. She paused, letting her words sink into the silence. "And today," Dorothy continued, "that mirror is here." No one objected. No one left. Because everyone understood this was a rare moment when a large corporation had nowhere to hide. The boutique's glass doors reflected the lights from outside. Reporters lined the sidewalks. A line of television cars stretched out. Manhattan was witnessing a moment that large corporations always feared most: the truth, unfolding before PR could even prepare. Charles Hendris stood before the array of cameras. He adjusted his tie, but his hands still trembled slightly. This wasn't a staged press conference. This was a public hearing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hendris began, his voice low but firm. "Today, at one of our stores, a customer was assaulted and insulted due to unacceptable prejudice. That statement instantly spread across platforms. Dorothy stood behind him, silent, but present as an unmistakable shadow. This behavior, Hendris continued, is not an isolated incident. It reflects serious flaws in our training, supervision, and leadership culture. A reporter interjected, "Are you saying the company acknowledges legal responsibility?" Hendris looked directly into the camera. He remembered Dorothy's words tell the truth. "Yes, we acknowledge responsibility." A murmur spread through the crowd. News outlets immediately changed their headlines. Dorothy stepped forward, not grabbing the microphone, just standing there, and her mere presence silenced the room. Hendris continued, "We have terminated the contracts of the individuals involved, and will implement a comprehensive system-wide restructuring program." Another reporter asked loudly, "Is it because Dorothy Washington is a major investor that the company is reacting so strongly?" At that moment, Dorothy stepped right up to the microphone. "No," she said, her voice clear. "If the company were only reacting strongly because I am an investor, that would indicate a much deeper problem." She looked directly into the camera, addressing the tens of thousands watching online. No one deserves to be slapped. Not because of the color of their skin, not because of their age, not because they have money or not. The crowd fell silent. Dorothy continued, "I'm not here to demand privilege. I'm here to ensure that no one else has to go through this." Hendris nodded, accepting his secondary role in this moment. He concluded the press conference with a line not found in any PR script. "We were wrong, and we will change under public scrutiny." Inside the boutique, Zoe looked at the live stream viewership 87. "Lin Lin Ling," she whispered. "I've never seen a CEO say that." Dorothy turned to Zoe, smiling faintly, because they're rarely forced to tell the truth. When the press conference ended, Hendris turned back to Dorothy. "You did something my entire legal department wouldn't dare." Dorothy replied, her voice calm, "I simply refused to let the story be buried." Outside, the headlines were running. CEO admits fault after assault goes viral, retail giant forced into reform. But Dorothy knew the apology was only the beginning. The hardest part was yet to come, turning those words into real action. 30 days after the slap in Lumiere, America no longer viewed the incident as a social media drama. It had become a social precedent. Marcus Webb appeared before the Manhattan court in his orange prison uniform. No more suit. No more store manager name tag. Just a man bowing his head before the dock. The video of the slap played back in the courtroom slow, clear, without missing a detail. Each time his hand touched Dorothy's cheek, the entire courtroom held its breath. The judge looked at Webb and said, "You didn't just assault an individual. You abused your power based on prejudice." Webb received a short prison sentence, a long probationary period, and a permanent ban from working in any customer service position in New York State. His career ended on paper. Not just on social media. Karen Phillips didn't go to criminal court, but faced a civil lawsuit for property seizure and defamation. Her insurance company refused to pay due to improper procedure. She lost her job, her reputation, and more importantly, she lost the chance to return to the high-end retail industry she once considered her own territory. Rachel Morrison received official notice, her contract terminated due to gross failure in leadership. No major retail corporation wanted to touch that name again. She wasn't arrested, but her career ended in silence. A silence heavier than handcuffs. Meanwhile, at headquarters, the Dorothy Washington Protocol began to be implemented. Stores nationwide received the new materials. Employees had to participate in mandatory training. Every customer interaction had an independent reporting channel. Phrases once whispered people like them. They don't look like customers now became taboo words. Zoe Lane returned to school, but her life was different. Her videos were used in classes on media and ethics. When reporters asked Zoe why she dared to livestream, she answered simply, because no one else would. Dorothy Washington refused all exclusive interview offers. She didn't want to be a media icon. What she wanted was measurable results. 30 days later, the first report arrived at her desk. Discrimination complaints decreased by 41%. 98% of employees completed training self. No violent incidents were recorded. Dorothy folded the report. No smile. No celebration. She only said one thing to Jennifer. This is what should have been here from the beginning. Outside the office window, Manhattan was as noisy as ever. But somewhere in the American retail system, something had changed forever. And that slap, no longer remembered as a moment of violence, was not, but as the moment a system was forced to bow before the light. 90 days after the slap in the Lumiere boutique, Dorothy Washington returned to Manhattan not to check, not to assert her authority, but to confirm one thing: whether the change was real. The glass door swung open. No one flinched. No prying eyes. No whispers behind her back. A new manager, in her early 30s, approached, her voice calm. "Good morning. Ma'am, can we assist you today?" "No. What are you looking for?" "No. Are you sure?" Just a proper question for a human being. Dorothy nodded, walking straight to her familiar display case. The Hermes bag from that year was still there, like a historical stitch that had never been erased. She picked it up, examined the stitching, lightly touched the leather. "I'll take this one." The manager smiled. "Yes. Would you like it wrapped as a gift or to take it with you?" Dorothy replied, "Take it with me." She pulled out her card. No one snatched it. No one suspected anything. The transaction was completed in professional silence. As she walked out the door, Dorothy paused for a second, looking at the marble floor where the bag had fallen, where the blood had touched. She spoke softly, as if to herself. "This is normal." Outside, Manhattan was still bustling. Cars, people, lights, everything continued. But this story was no longer just about one store. In retail training sessions across America, the video of the slap was replayed not to incite outrage, but to remind everyone power doesn't lie in titles, but in how you treat the weakest person before you. Marcus Webb, now just a name in court records, had lost everything that had once made him believe he had the right. Not because Dorothy was a billionaire, not because Dorothy had a helicopter or CEO behind her, but because the light had been turned on. And when the light comes, those who live in the shadows are always the first to fall. Dorothy Washington never said she won. But every time a customer walks into a luxury store without being judged by their skin color, age, or clothing, every time an employee chooses respect over prejudice, every time a system stops shielding abusers, that is a victory. And if anyone asks why Marcus Webb lost his career in minutes, the answer is simple. He didn't fall because of who Dorothy Washington was. He fell because of who he chose to be when he thought no one was watching. This story ends here, but its lesson continues.